There's a moment in every investigation when the story stops being about questions and starts being about silence. When Benny Thompson raised a bag of shredded evidence and asked Stephen Miller who ordered the destruction of 1,200 subpoenaed documents. What followed wasn't denial, explanation, or outrage. It was 298 seconds that may have said everything. This is not a normal hearing. This is not a routine oversight session about records retention policy or bureaucratic compliance checklists. This is a controlled environment where a timeline collapses under pressure, where a single question forces an entire system to reveal what it was trying to hide, and where silence, measured down to the second, becomes more incriminating than any spoken answer. Friday afternoon, 3:47 p.m. Eastern, House Oversight Committee Room 254. The official title reads like something designed to bore the public into tuning out. Oversight of DHS records retention and federal compliance protocols. But inside that room, every investigative journalist, every legal analyst, every staffer who understands what a subpoena means knew exactly what was about to unfold. Because when a hearing includes sealed evidence bags filled with shredded documents, it is no longer about policy. It is about destruction. Benny Thompson does not rush. He does not raise his voice. He does something far more dangerous. He builds a sequence. First, the date, March 23rd. Then the time, 2:47 in the morning. Then the number, 1,200 documents. Not archived, not misplaced, destroyed. And not just any documents. Active investigative files that had been subpoenaed by Congress 4 days earlier. Let that sit for a second. 4 days. A federal subpoena is not a suggestion. It is a legal command to preserve evidence exactly as it exists. No alterations, no transfers, no destruction. And yet, at 2:47 a.m., someone with Keycard access walks into a secure DHS facility with an industrial crosscut shredder, the kind designed to turn classified material into particles too small to reconstruct, and runs it for over an hour. This is where the story should get complicated. This is where there should be layers of explanation, bureaucratic confusion, plausible deniability. Instead, what Benny Thompson does is remove every possible escape route before the question is even answered. He introduces the memo, dated March 19th, signed, acknowledged, distributed to all division heads, including Stephen Miller. The instruction is unambiguous. All documents under subpoena must be preserved in their original form. No destruction under any circumstance without direct authorization from legal counsel. So now the mistake argument is gone. Then comes the access logs. A keycard tied directly to a senior policy advisor from Miller's office enters the facility. Security footage shows the individual wheeling in the shredder. Electrical systems record a power surge consistent with industrial shredding. And an hour and 36 minutes later, that same individual exits with multiple bags later recovered, filled with the shredded remains of 1,200 documents. So now the unknown actor argument is gone. And yet, despite all of that, despite the memo, the footage, the logs, the physical evidence sitting on the table in clear plastic bags, when the question finally lands, when the room goes silent and the weight of federal law presses down on one man, Stephen Miller does not answer. He doesn't deny. He doesn't explain. He doesn't even deflect. He sits there. And that silence is where this stops being about documents and starts being about something much bigger. Because silence in a room like that is not neutral. It is not hesitation. It is not confusion. It is a choice. And Benny Thompson understands that better than anyone in that room. So he doesn't interrupt it. He measures it. He pulls out his phone, opens the stopwatch, and places it where everyone can see. Not just the members of the committee, not just the attorneys shifting in their seats, but the cameras, the record, history itself. And with one quiet motion, he presses start. 10 seconds. At first, it looks like strategy. Stephen Miller sits upright, hands flat against the table, jaw tight, eyes forward. His attorneys lean in, whispering, calculating, searching for a path out of a situation that is already collapsing in real time. 20 seconds. The whispers get sharper. Papers shuffle. One attorney gestures subtly, as if suggesting an answer. Any answer. Something to break the tension before it hardens into something irreversible. 30 seconds. A voice from across the room, controlled, almost cautious, asks the question no one really wants answered out loud. Does the staffer who shredded those documents still work for DHS? The answer comes back just as controlled, just as final. Number. They resigned. 3 days after the shredding. Left the state. Unreachable. 40 seconds. Now the room understands this is not going to resolve itself. This is not a misunderstanding that will be clarified with a sentence or two. This is something else, something that has already moved beyond administrative error and into the territory of intent. 50 seconds. And this is where the framing locks in. Because what Benny Thompson is doing is not waiting for an answer. He is documenting the absence of one. He is turning silence into evidence, capturing not just what is said, but what is refused. 60 seconds. 1 full minute. And still, nothing. So he leans forward, not aggressively, not emotionally, but with the precision of someone who has already mapped out the end of this exchange. Who ordered it? The question doesn't change. 70 seconds. If this were defensible, this is where the defense would appear. If there were context, this is where it would be offered. If there were an alternative explanation, this is where it would begin to take shape. But nothing comes. 80 seconds. And now the evidence begins to stack, not as accusation, but as inevitability. Because Benny Thompson doesn't need the answer to continue. He already has the structure. He already has the sequence. What he needs is for the record to show that the person sitting in front of him chose not to engage with it. 90 seconds. A minute and a half. And then the shift. The tone doesn't rise, but the content sharpens. Let me tell you what those documents were. Now, we are no longer dealing with abstract numbers or procedural violations. Now, the shredded material begins to take form, piece by piece, category by category, each one adding weight to the question that remains unanswered. 100 seconds. 340 of those documents, policy directives, signed, authorized, connected directly to decisions that shaped how information was collected, filtered, and reported. 110 seconds. 520. Internal communications, emails, discussions, deliberations about how to present data to Congress, how to frame numbers, how to avoid specific lines of questioning. 120 seconds. 2 full minutes. And then the final layer. 340. Financial records, contractor payments, federal funds distributed, tracked internally, but never fully disclosed. Now the silence isn't empty anymore. It's crowded. Crowded with context. Crowded with implication. Crowded with the realization that whatever was destroyed wasn't random. It was selected. 130 seconds. And here is where the logic closes in completely. Because someone didn't just decide to shred documents. Someone identified which documents. Someone knew where they were stored. Someone had access. Someone acted within a 4-day window after a legal order explicitly forbidding that action. And someone, at this very moment, is choosing not to explain why. 140 seconds. And the question doesn't change. It doesn't need to. Who gave the order? 150 seconds. And now the room is no longer waiting for an answer. It is bracing for what comes next, because Benny Thompson has stopped asking questions that require cooperation and started delivering statements that don't. He steps closer. Not rushed, not theatrical. Controlled. Measured. Like someone moving from inquiry into indictment. One more thing, he says, and the tone shifts just enough for everyone to understand this is no longer about what might have happened. It is about what already has. 160 seconds. We found the staffer. That sentence lands differently, because up until now, there was still a thin thread. Thin, fragile, but there, that maybe this could be contained within ambiguity. Maybe the person who entered that room at 2:47 a.m. was gone, unreachable, unavailable to testify. That thread is gone now. They're cooperating. 170 seconds. And with that, the silence changes shape. It is no longer defensive. It is exposed. Because cooperation means testimony. Testimony means detail. Detail means sequence. And sequence, when it aligns with evidence already on the table, becomes something far more dangerous than accusation. They told us everything. Now the room isn't quiet. It's locked. 180 seconds. 3 full minutes. They told us you called them. The timeline snaps into place. March 22nd, 11:47 p.m. Not days earlier, not weeks. Hours. Hours before the shredding began. They told us you asked if they had access. That's not policy. That's not protocol. That's intent. They told us you said there were files that needed to be disposed of immediately. Now the language matters. Not archived. Not reviewed. Disposed. 190 seconds. They told us you gave them a list. A list. Not a category. Not a department. A list. 1,200 box numbers. Each one selected. Each one located. Each one fed into a machine designed to erase. 200 seconds. And now the moral contrast is unavoidable. Because this is no longer about a bureaucratic failure. This is about a decision. A decision made late at night, outside normal procedure, in direct contradiction to a federal subpoena, executed by someone with access and followed by silence. They told us you said it had to be done that night. Before anyone could stop it. Before oversight could intervene. Before accountability could catch up. 210 seconds. And then comes the part that shifts this from obstruction into something colder. They told us you thanked them. After it was done. They told us you told them to leave the state. Not report. Not document. Leave. And they told us you offered to help with relocation. Now we are no longer discussing documents. We are discussing behavior. 220 seconds. Because evidence can be destroyed. Paper can be shredded. But actions, calls, messages, transfers, those leave traces. We have the phone logs. We have the text messages. We have the bank records. Each line lands like a separate charge, each one closing off another exit. And still, Stephen Miller says nothing. 230 seconds. At this point, the silence is no longer just absence. It is alignment. Alignment with every piece of evidence already presented. Alignment with the timeline. Alignment with the testimony. 240 seconds. 4 full minutes. A voice from the committee breaks through, not to defend, not to question the evidence, but to ask something simpler. If you already have all of this, why are we waiting? And that question matters, because it exposes the strategy behind everything that has just happened. Benny Thompson doesn't look at the witness when he answers. He looks at the room, at the record, because I want it documented. Not just what happened, but how it was handled. I want it on record how long he chose silence over truth. 250 seconds. And now the countdown isn't just time. It's pressure. It's inevitability. It's the final narrowing of a moment that has nowhere left to go. Mr. Miller, he says, voice steady, final. I'm going to count to 298. And for the first time since the question was asked, the room understands exactly what this silence is about to become. 251 seconds. And now the countdown isn't symbolic anymore. It's procedural. It's legal. It's the final step before silence stops being tolerated and starts being recorded as obstruction. Benny Thompson doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The weight of what has already been established is doing the work for him. The memo, the subpoena, the timestamps, the footage, the staffer, the calls, the money. All of it is already sitting in the record. Now he is just giving Stephen Miller one last opportunity to step into it, or stand against it. 260 seconds. Nothing. Not a correction. Not a denial. Not even a carefully crafted non-answer. Just stillness. 270 seconds. And this is where the moment transforms from political theater into something colder, something procedural, something irreversible. Because in a congressional hearing, silence is not protection. It is exposure. Mr. Miller, Thompson says, steady, controlled, almost clinical now. This is a federal crime. He lets that sit, not as a threat, as a definition. Destruction of subpoenaed documents, obstruction of a congressional investigation. 280 seconds. And here is the part no one in that room can ignore anymore. Because this is no longer about what might be proven. It is about what has already been laid out, piece by piece, until the only missing element is acknowledgement. And even that is no longer required. 290 seconds. The stopwatch is still running. The cameras are still rolling. The record is still being written. And Stephen Miller is still silent. 295. 296. 297. 298. The timer stops. 4 minutes and 58 seconds. Nearly 5 minutes. The longest silence in congressional hearing history, not because no one had anything to say, but because the one person who needed to speak chose not to. And that choice becomes the final piece of evidence. Benny Thompson doesn't hesitate. Mr. Chairman, the witness has refused to answer. No emotion. No flourish. Just a statement. I move to hold Stephen Miller in criminal contempt of Congress. Seconded. I further move to refer this matter to the Department of Justice for prosecution under federal obstruction statutes. Seconded. Passed. Unanimously. And just like that, the silence that was supposed to protect him becomes the mechanism that moves the case forward. But this is where the story shifts again. Because this was never just about one man in one room on one afternoon. This is about what happens when power collides with accountability. This is about what happens when a federal subpoena, one of the clearest legal commands in the system, is treated like an obstacle instead of an obligation. This is about 1,200 documents, policy directives, internal emails, financial records, destroyed not by accident, not by confusion, but in a controlled window, with access, with intent, and with follow-up actions designed to bury the trail. And this is about what it means when the system actually catches it. Because think about the contrast. On one side, a staffer moving through a secured facility at 2:47 in the morning, feeding documents into a machine designed to erase them beyond recovery. On the other side, investigators reconstructing the entire sequence anyway, through logs, footage, power usage, testimony, digital trails. One side trying to make something disappear, the other proving that it never really can. So the real question isn't whether those documents were destroyed. They were. The real question is this: if the evidence can be shredded, the witnesses can be moved, and the answers can be withheld. But the truth still surfaces anyway. What does that say about the system? And more importantly, what does it say about anyone who still believes silence is enough to outrun accountability? Because in that room, for 298 seconds, silence didn't protect power. It exposed it. If you believe accountability should not depend on who holds the authority, like this video. If you think silence should never be allowed to replace truth, comment below. Share this so more people see what really happened inside that room. And subscribe, because stories